This past June 4th, we gathered at Artspace in downtown Raleigh for the unveiling of the Familias Separadas public art project. Tonight, we're joined by Michelle Angela Ortiz, creator of Familias Separadas, along with North Carolina artist Peter Marin. Also, we will see some videos of some of the community members featured in the public art project. Hi, I'm Lizette Cruz Watko, and welcome to another episode of compARTE, Diamante Arts and Cultural Center's online show. So Michelle, Peter, how are you guys doing?
Doing good, staying cool.
It's hot out. It is a hot July.
I'm doing well, thank you. I hope everybody's doing fine.
Great. Well, I'm going to start with you, Michelle, since you are the creator of this project, the Familia Separada project. And if you can give me a little bit of background, like what got you inspired to do this project, when did it start, and a little bit of the backstory, that would be great. And maybe even a little bit about you.
Well, I'm coming at you from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, which is where I'm based. I'm still on the same block where I was born and raised, and I'm a child of immigrants. My mother is originally from the Caribbean coast of Colombia, and my father is from Puerto Rico. And so for 20 years, I've been working as a visual artist, really in utilizing public space, working with communities and reflecting their stories, and really imagining the change that they want in their own communities, and addressing and bringing to light and awareness social issues in which they are living in and as part of their reality. So Familias Separadas really came to be in 2013 at the height of the number of deportations that were happening in the United States. And I was also witness to how undocumented immigrant communities within the South Philadelphia area, which is where I'm from, a lot of undocumented families were being targeted by ICE presence, ICE raids, or local police collaborating with ICE. And targeting our communities. And I felt that in a city where we have the Liberty Bell, the Declaration of Independence, all these symbols of freedom, what does that mean for so many families that are living in fear and are being separated due to this unjust immigration system? So that came to be the Familias Separadas Phase 1, which took place in 2015, where I did about 5 installations in Philadelphia. The most notable one is the installation that we did in front of the Immigration Customs Enforcement building, which is one of the most aggressive ICE buildings in the United States, ICE facilities in the United States. It has jurisdiction in Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Jersey. When we think about the immigration narrative, it's very much centered in the border. And so I felt that it was necessary to really think about that, how this issue still impacts so many other communities that are not centered at the border. They're throughout our whole nation. So phase 2 of Familias Separadas was focused on 14 mothers, 4 out of 14 mothers that were detained for 2 years. And out of that came out a number of installations and a documentary called Las Madres de Berks. Phase 3 is where North Carolina comes in. So phase 3 actually started in the middle of the pandemic. So thanks to the generous support of the Art for Justice Fund, which is a national grant that was awarded to me to continue to do this work. Because we had limitations with travel, that's where I decided to just expand my team. And that's where I found you, Lizette, through Diamante and through the help of Moms Rising, which is a national organization.
When you were looking for this team, what were you looking for? And how did you go about, getting all the artists that you needed to support you in your absence?
I feel that I'm an artist and a storyteller at the same time. And so I was able to get some support with our playwright, Paul Flores, who is based in San Francisco. So the great thing about the advantages of doing the virtual sessions, creative sessions, which there were a total of 10 2-hour creative sessions that we engaged with different community members. And in North Carolina, we engaged with 3 community members, Carmen, Angelica, and Oscar. They went through 5 sessions with Paul, following a curriculum. When I was looking for local artists in each location, I felt that it was necessary to have artists that have obviously a commitment and high skill level within their artistic studio practice, plus a commitment to their community, right? And an understanding of the issues around that the communities face, right? Around immigration, around separation of families, around unjust laws that are in place. So, Peter Marin became one of the artists that we received a couple of submissions for the call for artists. And what was great about Peter was just seeing his work, which is incredible and very powerful. Plus, coming from another country, originally from Mexico, and his experience of moving around. And his commitment to the local immigrant community in Raleigh in particular, but as think about it, if the location in North Carolina. So the other great thing about Peter is that he also is an educator, right? And so in this process, it was kind of wearing many hats, which he can speak to. But we needed an artist very similar to how I would even manage my work, of kind of wearing those many hats. So I'm so grateful to have connected with Peter. And he's been such an amazing asset to our creative team.
Oh, muchas flores ahí.
I see.
So Peter, when you saw the call to artists to support the Familias Separadas project, what drew you to it?
Well, what drew me was, it's a multiple entries into it. An artist opportunity where I can put my skills and my knowledge and my experience to work as I want them to be. But also it was an opportunity as well to continue working with my local community and with issues that matter to me. And Familias Separadas, although it's something I have not engaged in directly, it's been something that is been at the core of my concerns. I've worked with the immigrant community prior to this in tracking our food supplies and our food sources, and sort of exposing the structure of the food chain. And it is impossible to think of our food systems without immigrant communities. And so this seemed a natural step for me to continue my work with my community, the Mexican and Latino undocumented community, and documented as well. But it seemed a project that I could put something into my expertise, my knowledge, and my energy to bring a greater awareness of the issues that surround this. But what really grabbed my attention was that art was being utilized as the principal um, medium, and that it wasn't about a different type of action, but rather it was a call to consciousness through the utilization of art. And so I felt that that was something that I could align myself with and bring my experiences and my energy to.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very glad that I did.
Well,
This project has had quite an impact.
I was going to ask you how has it affected you? What have you absorbed from this project on a personal level?
Well, on a personal level, what it allowed me to do was to continue to strengthen the bonds between community members, community organizers, organizations that have immigrant rights and immigrant um, initiatives at the center. I've worked with and I've represented other organizations in the past And so being able to re-strengthen the bonds amongst these organizations and our community members was something that that was really important to me. Being here in Raleigh, North Carolina, unlike any other place that I've been in the past, there is a very strong sense of community. The fact that one of our community members is well known amongst all tiers of our collaborators speaks to that fact. And so being able to work with different organizations such as Diamante, such as El Pueblo, El Centro Hispano, wasn't really an issue of competition or stepping on each other's shoes, as much as it was a labor of reinforcing that our actions are aligned in similar directions, and that we have to be allies amongst ourselves. I think the community has gained a great deal of strength as a result. I had a couple today in my studio earlier who I don't know, who who mentioned the project outside, um, unbeknownst, and I was happy to talk to them about it. And we got into this conversation about supporting ourselves, about the hard work that needs to be done, about being aware of the obstacles that lie ahead of us. And so not only was it a moment to support each other, but it was also a moment to inform each other and to create a bond, to create a strength within the community. And so I think that the Raleigh Durham community, through individuals and through the member organizations, has strengthened its ally status to each other in a way that I've seen other places fail at.
Michelle, how did you decide that it was important to not just do an art project, to do an art project, but to involve those community members and tell their stories? And how was Peter able to help you in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if if anyone should be sharing their stories, it should be coming from the people who are directly impacted by this issue. And so how I see the public artwork, how I see just even our sessions is really just a way to, the sessions themselves, the creative sessions were, as I mentioned, a combination of conversations, of writing, of sharing stories. Then it was also every one of the community members received like kind of an art kit and a camera. And so we even did a workshop on how to film yourself, how to tell your story, and then begin to kind of illustrate concepts, visual concepts that eventually led to being represented in the final designs. And so those are all tools that I feel are necessary within our community, because they're just other tools and other ways to share your story, right? And to learn those tools, even though the community members are like, I'm not a photographer, I'm not an artist, I'm not, right? It's just having them shift their perspective and looking at things in a very different way, or thinking about symbolism and thinking about maybe taking a pause and saying, okay, what is around me that is a reflection of my identity, of my own history, of my journey, right? So we have also just like 3 amazing community members that participated in the project, and same as how I came into contact with Peter and his references and, speaking to folks around his work. Carmen Rodriguez, better known as Carmen Gum, was someone who was connected to us through Sheila Arayes from Moms Rising, and Mamas con Poder. And mostly because of Carmen's, not just her activism, that she has, kind of grabbed the reins in, and has found ways even throughout the quarantine and in being able to support community. So we wanted to also just highlight not just someone who is affected by the system, but someone who is also taking action, right? Around creating awareness, creating change, and speaking up when most people are very afraid to, especially if they're in a position of which they are being targeted because of their status.
We're going to hear firsthand Carmen's story.
El ser indocumentada y directamente afectada me dio el valor para decidir ser parte de la desobediencia. Eran 5 personas ciudadanas y yo, sin documentos. Tal vez en algún momento sentí miedo, pero decidí convertirlo en valentía para seguir luchando.
And then we came into contact with Angelica Davila and Oscar Menendez Serrano through El Centro Hispano. So with your help, Lizette, in connecting with El Centro Hispano, we were able to identify Angelica and Oscar. Angelica is a DACA recipient, and she speaks to how, she went from working on farms to then struggling in college. And in the midst of her being in college, her brother being detained and the fear of him being deported, and how that really impacted her and her family, which was, always very close knit. She speaks to in her piece, somos los pilares económicamente de mi familia. So being the pillars, but I sense that beyond than just being the pillars economically for her family, also just spiritually, and emotionally for her family, right? And so, and when you see Angelica, she's always very soft-spoken and quiet, but she's just has such an amazing and powerful story. And that was really beautiful to hear, to see that as someone who's going to college, and struggling as someone who's undocumented, and also feeling like she couldn't really tell people that she was undocumented, right? But still advocating for her brother and trying to save her brother from deportation, was just such a courageous story.
Here's Angelica's story.
Como familia siempre hemos trabajado juntos. Yo y mi hermano somos como los pilares de la familia económicamente. También le ayudamos mucho a mi papá con mi hermanita. Iba a afectar a mi familia la deportación de mi hermano, pero si no hubiera sido por DACA, no se iba a poder cancelar eso de esa deportación. Mi hermano estudió Information Technology y empezó a trabajar para VMware como un Computer Tech Support. Y yo decidí estudiar Mechanical Engineering Technology en Wake Tech. Estuvo un poquito difícil, pero sí me gradué y agarré una beca de 2 años.
We met Oscar, and Oscar is just such an artist himself. How he transforms himself into drag to become Gaga La Draga, and I think that was so inspirational in his story, is how he finds freedom in being drag, right? And so to hear him say that, to understand that freedom is not really defined by papers or by borders, that how are we as individuals creating our own freedom through expression, through
art,
raising our voice, through art. And so it was just amazing to hear Oscar's perspective. He's originally from El Salvador, and so representing the Central American community, but also just, the LGBTQ community is often marginalized even within the immigrant community. So to be able to have both Oscar and Angelica representing the LGBTQ community, to be seen, to be heard, it was just so incredibly moving to bear witness to their story.
And during Pride Month, what an unveiling.
Exactly.
So here's Oscar's story.
Yo ya había escuchado antes que si uno es indocumentado, uno debe de formar un plan o buscar a un abogado y hablar con su abogado en caso de que lo detengan y saber si es mejor firmar la salida voluntaria o no. Ya había escuchado eso y lo hice. Yo me siento como parte de la comunidad aquí en North Carolina porque he trabajado junto al centro hispano. Cuando hay un evento siempre me han buscado a mí porque yo hago drag. Soy un trabajador de construcción desde que llegué acá hace 14 años. También hago caracterizaciones de otras personas y entretener a otras personas sin estar haciendo nada malo en este país más que siendo tú mismo y cumpliendo tus propios sueños.
These stories, how did they affect you, knowing their stories while trying to document them at the same time?
Uh, their stories have a two-way effect, I think, in that you hear them firsthand and you put a face, they become human. And you realize that this human is just like you, has had similar struggles, and that they are contributing, they're collaborating, they're participating, and they're hiding, and they're keeping, and they're struggling. I think that those characteristics ring true for a lot of our communities. And so, for me to hear these stories affirm that what we're doing is the right thing to do in supporting the stories. Sometimes all we have as marginalized communities, for example, being affected by deportations, are the stories. And so the stories are extremely crucial to maintain. In the case of Oscar, Angelica, and Carmen, their stories need to be heard. They need to be recognized. They need to be part of our daily folklore, of our daily work towards changing these draconian laws. Because oftentimes, when you have nothing, the story is the only thing you have. And that is such a powerful medium to be able to share with people because it really comes from the fountain of who you are. It is not fabricated, it comes from the experience and the texture of which you felt the world with. And so these stories are important to hear because there are thousands of these stories, similar stories, stories of struggle, stories of division, stories of chaos um, in people's attempts to improve their lives, to make things better for them. And so in our community, I think it's very important that these stories stay alive, much like stories function in other communities, to make sure that we don't forget or that we keep in mind what is at stake.
Me personally, I I was affected by the stories in the sense that these three folks haven't given up. They're living their life without fear. They're setting an example for others, but they're also teaching us what the struggles are. And I found that commendable in all three cases. Is the exhibit going to go away soon, or how long is it going to be around?
So the pieces will be up through November 5th. So there's a good amount of time for people to come and engage with the work. To what I wanted to share was that each one of the banners, they're about 20-foot tall banners that are portraits of each one of the community members. So there's the photographs that Peter took of the community members based on the composition that I shared with him, and then with elements of design that reflect some of the stories that they've shared, as well as their handwritten stories by their own hand on the actual image. But along with the 20-foot tall portraits, which are meant to be as these kind of visual monuments to the three community members and the communities that they represent, There's also kind of a small little QR code for folks to listen to the full length of their story. And so that's both in English and in Spanish, but the most important thing is to utilize that public art as a way for people to hear the voices of the community members. So it's not myself or Peter speaking on their behalf. It is their themselves, and they also film themselves in doing their stories too. So that was another beautiful thing, is the fact that we had these amazing videos, and utilizing the cameras and the tools that they learned, that was beautifully captured in the film. So I also want to emphasize that when you see those films, when you see the videos and hear them, it is the community member directing and deciding how they want their story to be told. But people can see the works. Artspace in particular, first of all, Artspace was very generous in offering the space and really believe in the work that we were doing. And at the same time, Artspace is only a few miles away from the Wake County prison or jail that is also kind of the first points of detention. And so very much like Artspace and the Wake County Jail in terms of its proximity to these detention centers or facilities that lend themselves into the system of deportation and detention of undocumented immigrants. That's very much similar to the other locations chosen nationally. The idea around the work too, and these public art installations, was trying to find a visible location, places that supported what the mission is and the story, plus creating awareness, not just in sharing the stories, but the proximity of when you are standing there and you're looking at the portraits, how close you are to the actual institutions and facilities that contribute to the detention of undocumented immigrants. So I feel that that's really
and the separation of families in the
exactly. So whether you're detained or held for a day or 2 days, that even that experience is extremely traumatic. And that's the other thing that we've seen also within the other stories that were highlighted through this project in the other locations, is just the trauma, the fear that extends out to not just the family and community, right? And so what we're trying to talk about is just, it's not just about the moment of being detained. It is about the experience of feeling that at any given moment you can be separated from your child, you can be separated from your family and not really know what's going to happen. And at the same time, I feel that when you see the images of Angelica, when you see the images of Carmen and Oscar, they're not presented in a position of being victimized, even though they are victims of the system. But it is about, in the midst of that system, how they still stand tall, how they still continue to live their lives, how they still continue to find ways to feel free, to fight, to find love and support one another. And I feel that, especially in the art world, when we talk about immigration, I feel that there's a lot of public artwork that's out there around shock value, around talking about how we're victims, about talking about pain, and pain is real, right? And so we're not shying away from that. We're not shying away from that fear and that trauma. But at the same time, it's incredibly important for our communities and for others to know that in the midst of all of that, there are people that are still standing tall and still moving forward.
Hmm. Peter, can you tell us a little bit more about the setup of the exhibit before we go?
Yes, I would like to also sort of piggyback here on the last comment of Michelle, and that we did not show these community members, our allies, in any position of victimization. And what is gained by that? They've become standard bearers for the community. They can share their experiences, and they can share their valor and their courage. They can stand tall in their communities and know that they're supported. And so this is also very important because their lives have been transformed somewhat as a result of this too. And they've been recognized for their strength, and they've been recognized for what they contribute to the narrative that we're sharing. So I think that that's very important. The exhibits form sort of a multi-dimensional part. We have the installations, which are three large um, prints or printed uh, materials that are 20 feet tall and 10 feet high. They're set to be there for till November 5th. And so they go from becoming maybe fashionable or temporary to actually gaining a type of like iconic status. People will see these over the months and they will come to understand them. It's not something that came and went as quickly as perhaps advertising does. And so that opens up a really interesting space for the public art. It allows people to engage over time and to be reminded over time of what they're looking at. Secondly, in the lobby of Artspace, we have a small collection of photographs, all taken by the community members themselves. And keep in mind that they really were new at the art mediums, but we are allowing them to be expressive with these and showing them how what they perhaps perceived as a limitation was actually a strength. Taking a picture of their interior or of themselves getting ready in the morning. All these speak to the strength of that character and to the strength of the people who are highlighting. As Michelle mentioned earlier, each of the images outside has a QR code that takes you directly to the community members' stories, to the Familias Separadas website. And not only that, we have these images attached to a building that is an arts institution. And so every month on First Friday, there will be conversations about it because it is what is it's on exhibit. My role is to be able to make sure that those questions get answered, for example, that people have the proper information, but also that people realize that this is sort of a multi-layered project. And so we're using in situ artwork, we're using gallery artwork, we're using virtual artwork, we're using recordings, we're using photography, and we're doing this across a pandemic without ability to meet with the group. And so it's also been done virtually. And so the project itself has so many layers of how it functions that not only it speaks to the project's purpose, but it also speaks to the obstacles that we as a team had to overcome.
Yeah, wow. There was a lot there. I can't. I would be remiss if I don't tell folks that when you go to Artspace, make sure you go to the second floor. No, the first floor where Peter has his studio, and you can see him at work and ask him any questions that you like. Um, I thank you both for letting Diamante participate in this project with you. I thank you for putting it out there. I thank the community members for participating, and I I am appreciative of your presence tonight.
Thank you so much, Lizette. Thanks for opening the space for us to share more about this work. And yeah, I just want to encourage people to go see this work. There are ways that, you can also support these amazing organizations like Diamante, El Centro Hispano, El Pueblo, the work that Carmen is doing also on the ground. I believe she's every Sunday, she's
Every Sunday.
food. You can follow, we gotta find her. Maybe we can share that link on Facebook where folks can support. But and obviously as well, like, please visit and support local artists. I mean, that's one thing that I feel is always necessary in this work. But to utilize this moment to advocate and to lift up our local artists, supporting this work and continuing to do this work is so important. So but thank you for opening the space.
So remember, everybody, Artspace until November 5th. You can't miss them. They're huge. They're outside, and inside is the exhibit and also Peter's studio. Thank you for joining me once again here on compARTE, a program online from the Diamante Arts and Cultural Center. Please join me again next month as we celebrate, we get to know another Latino artist from North Carolina. compARTE is a production of Diamante Arts and Cultural Center.